welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to do form validation with the ASP.NET MVC framework. With the latest release, which is Preview 5, the MVC team has added form validation to the framework. It's pretty slick and pretty easy to use, but it's very, very powerful. It will completely simplify form validation and displaying it on the UI. Now to go ahead and get started, I've already created the HTML table. It's a standard login screen where you provide a username and password, hit a submit button. I have it routing to my home controller and a action method called login. And it's got a username and a password. What we want to do is actually validate that the person typing provides a valid username. In order to do that, I need to go over to my controller. I actually need to create an action method for it. Now, fortunately for us, if we have a form and all the fields map to an action that has the same names as parameters, the MVC framework will map all the form values to all the field value or parameter values for us. So it's pretty slick and takes care of a lot of work for us. So I'm going to go ahead and create an action method called login, provide a username and password. Because I don't have a view called login, I'm going to have it just go ahead and return and render my index view. Now, in a normal scenario, I would probably have some kind of object model that validates my username or my password. But in this scenario, I'm just going to validate that it doesn't match a given value. And if it does, I'll actually provide the error at that point in time. So I'm going to say if username not equal to Fred, then we have an issue. Because with this website, you're only allowed to be Fred and log in. Anything else, you're not able to log in. Now, at the latest version of the MVC framework, they added something to the view data object called ModelState. ModelState is what holds different error information about your model. Now, if you want to go ahead and add an error information, you just do ModelState.add model error, and it's going to ask you for the key. In my case, the key is going to be username. My key actually matches my field name. It can match your object model name. It can be a name you make up. It's probably best to have it match either your field or your object model. And that's going to ask me for my attempted value, which is username. And if I have a exception, I can pop that in there, or actually message. In my case, I'll put your name is not Fred. And that will be the message. Now I'm not going to go ahead and validate the password because, well, you get the point here. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now that I've validated the field, I actually need to display it on the UI somehow. To do that, all I have to do is go over and find my text box that correlates to the value I'm validating. And there's an HTML helper built in to help us with this. And it's called validate message. And here I'm going to provide my model name. This model name corresponds to the key name I provided right here in my add model error. And let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Now if I provide Sam as my password, or username, and anything as my password, click login, it'll say your name is not Fred, which is pretty easy and pretty cool and allows me to do validation very easily and very quickly. But I can hear you now saying, Derek, I don't want to put the message next to the text box. Maybe I want to have a summary of all my messages at the top of the field. Well, fortunately for us, the MVC framework adds that and has that capability as well. Because the model state is a collection, I can actually ask it if there's any data. So I can say if view data model state count greater than 0. So if I have a count, do something. Go ahead and pop this back here, make it nicely formatted. I can do something like doing response .write HTML helper again, and let's do validation summary. And by doing the validation summary, it'll actually display all my error messages, one after another. Let's go ahead and run this again and see what happens. Now here it says your name is not Fred, pops into a nice little UI for me, but I've also still got this over here and I don't want that. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. Now there's an overload to this validation message that allows me to put in any message I want, and it can be arbitrary or I can have it smart. Now if you wanted to say do an asterisk next to it, that will pop a little asterisk next to it. However, if you leave it empty string, it will still put the validation model message in there. If you want it to actually be empty, you need to actually pop white space into there. Let's try it again. You'll notice this says your name is Fred, is not Fred, and it highlights Sam. And it removed any text I had right here. Well, that's pretty cool, but you know, they've actually made this a little bit smarter for us, and they've actually allowed us to change the color or the display mechanism within the error message using CSS. Now to do that, all I have to do is I can do this in my standard CSS file, or I'll do it inline here. What I'm going to do is create an inline style sheet, and the property name that they used is input validation error. And I can change any aspect of this I want. So let's go ahead and change the border to be 10 pixels. 10 pixels solid blue. And I'm going to change the background. Let's have some fun with this. To be lime. Now, in order to actually get the information inside of this to change, all I have to do is come over to my text box, and I'm going to create a new anonymous object, not a key value pair from a dictionary. And I'm going to say that my class is equal to input validation error. And now when I rerun this, it should actually show up a little bit differently. So there, you see my border of 10, and it's got a lime green background. Still displays my your name is Fred. If you want to change the way this displays, you can do that as well. It's just another CSS attribute. Now, one quick thing I want to point out real quick is I've used an anonymous method here to describe my HTML attributes. Underscore class is used in this case because class is also a reserved word in the C# language. And whenever you're doing a reserved word, that also matches HTML reserved word or CSS reserved word or whatnot, you need to prefix it with an underscore when you're dealing with the HTML attributes. So there you go. I hope you learned something today. We've found out we've seen really easily how easy it is, to do form validation with the ASP.NET MVC framework. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and you should be able to get it up and running in no time flat. Well, till next time.